Bitcoin on Wednesday hit a new all-time high of more than 66,000
Now it's starting to actually gain some traction.
If you're stupid enough to buy it, you'll pay the price for it one day.
It has quintupled in value over the last year.
Elon Musk makes one of his riskiest bets ever.
Money is just a number in a database.
We're talking about a decentralized
world. The supply of dollars can never be sufficient to satisfy the debts that it creates.
Zuckerberg announced Facebook's new Metaverse name. US regulators look for ways to make banks more crypto-friendly. And could Bitcoin become the world's reserve currency? Welcome to All Time High, a crypto podcast. I'm your host, David Vader, and my co-host here is Sweaty.
Hey, man, really pumped to be here. We got some great stuff to talk about today, and some pretty interesting stuff, actually, zany and aspects, actually.
It's a little bit of a mixed bag for sure. The first article here that I'm reading is El Salvador president, Nayib Bukele, I think it's pronounced. He buys the dip, right. Adds 420 Bitcoin to the treasury. Of course, crypto Twitter went nuts with this because 420. But it's adding to his country's reserve in Bitcoin. He's now got 1,120 Bitcoins in the country reserves, which, not too many years ago didn't seem like a lot, but now, of course, it's worth a lot.
Oh, it's big money now. And of course, the 420 being part of the meme culture that is the internet, he's bought a few lots, actually, and they're averaging about 51,200, give or take. He bought the colloquial dip recently with the 420 purchase, and they're already in profit. That's pretty amazing that if you average 51,000, give or take, and then we hit some all-time highs way above 60,000, he's looking in really good stead. I think this is going to pay off long-term. Of course, we're long Bitcoin here. But if this actually starts really taking off over the next two, he's done a wonderful thing for the people of El Salvador. Absolutely.
And, you mentioned before, I wonder if the next purchase is going to be 69 Bitcoin, just to add to the memes.
I think it has to be. This is definitely a meme episode in parts, but taking it on a bit of a serious note, actually, and the fact that he's taken it on to be the currency of El Salvador. He's a younger guy. I think that it's an extremely bold move. Someone has to do it. I don't know the entire mechanics of why he's chosen to do it, who he's working with. This is something I want to look more into. Of course, South American countries aren't exactly famous for their wonderful handling of finances and economies, but we'll see how this all pans out. I'm going to segue into the next article, actually, where Bitcoin will be the world's reserve currency, says US Senator Rand Paul. And he's been involved in crypto since it was about 2016 when he said he'd accept it as part of his election campaign. And this is a really big name in US politics, starting up that kind of support for Bitcoin. And of course, the US dollar being the supreme reserve currency of the world, they're printing huge amounts of it. This is going to cause inflation. I think this is fairly settled now. And this is going to affect most countries around the world. Bitcoin, we know, is a really good candidate as a hedge against inflation. So backing Bitcoin to be the world's reserve currency is a very logical step to take amongst all of this.
That's right. And of course, Rand Paul, son of Ron Paul, who, is very well known in circles, pursuing the gold as money back in his early campaigns, talking about gold standards and bringing back gold standards. And I think that's rubbed off a little bit on Rand Paul, understands the fundamentals of what good money is. And I think he sees an opportunity with Bitcoin. And of course, his whole, he's based in Kentucky, but in the US back home, we've got regulators now exploring, how banks can hold crypto assets and how can we make banks more crypto friendly, because that is really the next step here. It's banks need to be able to invest in crypto because otherwise they're going to be left behind,
Yeah, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that, FDIC chairman?
Yeah, this is an interesting article, and there was actually a few that were brought up throughout the week that I was going through, and so Yelena McWilliams, she's the chair of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and they're part of this discussion that US bank regulators are having now together. They really push some regulations towards banks and to allow banks to take on crypto. It's kind of like this is the early days of regulating and how they can get involved with crypto. Essentially, banks will have to be involved. Once wide-scale adoption takes place, banks are literally shooting themselves in the foot by not being involved in this. It also means they are quite late to the party for regulation. And regulation within a capitalistic system is an important step to widespread adoption. And they're going to need to be a part of this. So these are now sort of the public first steps of talking about this kind of regulation and control measures that they're going to want to put in place. But yeah, they're going to need to take on crypto first.
That's right. And, you know, people in the Bitcoin space have been talking about institutional money for 5 years at least. I remember 2016, we were talking about it. But, you know, while we've had some institutions set up and corporations and now nation states that are buying up Bitcoin, really there's a vast untapped amount of money out there with high net worth individuals, very high net worth individuals that, you know, they can't invest just by buying Bitcoin on a wallet. They just have, you know, it's too much risk. They need to have regulation behind them. And so once these sort of things become, you know, legal and regulated and safe, then we're going to see a lot more money flowing into that space.
I think we'll also see a lot of middlemen companies coming up in corporations as part of what banks will be able to offer, like a custody service where they allow loans, they'll allow you to they'll look after your crypto, they'll help navigate ways to invest in it. We're already seeing that with some of these other products that have been coming out in the market recently. Raise is an app that a lot of people enjoy using, where you get exposure to crypto. And this is just kind of part of those early steps, which are going to allow that transition into it.
Yeah. I mean, everything's changing, right? The whole world is kind of changing. Yeah.
And that's actually one of the really big changes this week was the announcement that Facebook's changing its corporate name to Metaverse.
Just Meta, but yeah, it's aligned with the Metaverse for sure.
Yeah, Meta, sorry. Yeah. So this took me by surprise. I was away for work when this news hit. And I remember reading that Facebook was going to be changing its name, and then it came out as Meta, part of the Metaverse. And I think Facebook needs to align itself with these new trends. NFTs and crypto are part of those trends, but the larger trend is going to be moving towards effectively a virtual reality world.
Yep.
I hesitate to say the Matrix, but that's kind of what it is.
And I think really
that's where the real money will be.
That's right.
Exactly.
You know, I was joking with a friend who just bought a few prints for their walls. They just moved house, and I joked that they'd bought some NFTs IRL, and I thought, well, you know what, that's not actually that far from the truth, because you know we're very early stages now, but really the future has a number of dimensions, a number of universes, a number of metaverses, and our reality, real life, is only one of those. You know, you're going to be in the Facebook metaverse, and you're going to have art on your walls, and you're going to want to show things off. It's just like every game that's out there now. You have, you know, I play Rocket League a bit, and you know, you have all these wheels and different decals that you can put on your car, and you can make it look different. That's all like a status symbol, and if some are more rare than others, you want to use those ones because it looks cooler. It's amazing, man. You know, the whole world is kind of shifting that way. And I think Zuckerberg is one of those people that has, you know, amazing foresight when it comes to how the world is moving, where it's moving to.
He's got the opportunity as well, the money and the opportunity to pivot into this new, I guess, metaverse, which is essentially they're going to start with games, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Games have always been, not many people realize how at the forefront of technology video games are, especially with graphics processors and the ability to crunch just sheer processing power. A lot of crypto miners use graphics cards, which have been developed by these game companies to mine their crypto. This is a really big industry. There is billions and billions and billions of dollars involved in this industry. And Zuckerberg knows that his demographic audience are primarily younger generation people. I'd say he will be targeting 30-year-olds and younger early.
Yep.
It's a somewhat of an assumption, but you're looking at people who play video games and people who want to be involved in the digital realm in a virtual reality world. These are the people who want these, as you were saying, these decals, these collector's items, a sense of individuality and a sense of culture that we can claim as our own. This is a meme culture now that we're living in.
That's right. We've spoken about the meme world that we're living in quite a bit. And I think part of it is also that Facebook really doesn't want to get left behind. There's been threats to their business model. There's been other social media platforms. When they first launched, of course, they got huge because of their innovation. But now for them, it's a game of keep up with the front runner. Once you're in front, you have to be looking back to see where you're at and what is the runner next to me doing that I could steal and essentially borrow and help to propel myself forward, because otherwise you end up crashing down to the ground like MySpace did, or like Squid Game token did this week.
Oh man,
one of these meme coins. It went from 2,800 per coin down to half a penny within 15 minutes.
It was that was brutal. And I was reading tweets of people on Reddit, people saying, I'm worth like $5 billion on paper, but I can't sell a single coin. And what do you expect? It's a meme coin. It's going to happen with SHIB and Dogecoin. People are going to jump into this. It's not new that people throw money onto something in hopes that it's going to make money for them. But this was one of those ones where people should have really looked into it before they jumped on board. Yeah, look, unfortunately, we can chuckle about it because it is kind of silly, but of course, people are losing real wealth, and that's a right shame. But what can you do? People are going to make choices, and sometimes those choices aren't well thought out or well considered. I think that, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that has to be close to one of the biggest pumps and dumps in history. It was, 310,000% gain to drop to almost
6 billion
0.
wiped out. Yeah.
Oh, oof, that's pretty painful, man. Just keep your money safe and do some due diligence before you invest in anything. And there are other people involved in crypto who know a lot more than we do, that I assume most of our listeners would even understand. And it's well worth researching what they talk about. And one in particular I've been enjoying following is Plan B. From Twitter. So I first heard of Plan B on Reddit and started following on Twitter. So Plan B essentially started this stock to flow model. Well, he didn't start it himself. Stock to flow is already a well-established system of predicting the value of an asset, but he approached this by applying it to crypto, and in particular Bitcoin, and has hit the nail on the head a few times recently. And looking at the chart, the prediction model has been incredibly accurate. And in fact, in October, the prediction was a close above 63,000. That didn't quite happen. We did go above 6,000, essentially hitting 67,000 and then closing a little bit lower. That's pretty good predictions, especially in crypto, when you can predict months in advance and continually. So the prediction that Plan B's stock to flow model is looking at for November and actually even into Christmas is aiming up about 130,000 before the end of 2021 and 98,000 for November. That's US. Yeah, I think there's psychological barriers there for sure, but once the price starts flowing, it can go up very, very quickly, as we've seen in the past. Well, that was a $25,000 jump in a fortnight. Oh,
Look, these predictions are, lots of people making them, and what comes true, is a lot less than those predicting. But that said, this stock to flow model has some credibility. As you said, it's used in other industries as well. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in November and December. And of course, on the All Time High podcast, we'll be first to cover it. So make sure you check back in here. One other news item that I thought was pretty interesting this week is Peter Thiel, of course. He's one of the original founders of PayPal. He's a venture capitalist. He's one of those billionaires that takes the blood of the young and injects it in himself so he can stay young. But he came out and he was looking at the economy and talking about the economy. Of course, he's in the front line of that. And he says that 60K Bitcoin means that the economy is facing real crisis. That headline to me stood out because it really does show how far we've come and how ingrained Bitcoin is now as an indicator of where the economy is in the world. But it also, as he correctly points out, shows the situation in the world and how it's worsening. Inflation starting to take hold, supply chain issues that we've discussed previously on other episodes of this show. This whole price range for Bitcoin at 60K, sure, it might be stock to flow. It's a number of factors, but of course, the whole global economy is one driving factor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these experienced investors and venture capitalist billionaires who have been around money for 30, 40, 50 years, even some of these people, they understand what happens in these cyclic movements of printing money. They understand inflation. They understand market conditions. No one can predict what's going to happen intra-market in a day or a week, or what might happen during a crash, or when a crash may occur, and what are the mechanics of this causing this crash. With something like inflation and what's happening in the US, as we're seeing now, which is essentially, it is the world's reserve currency. They're printing not billions, trillions with a capital T of dollars. And that's going to cause a lot of issues that they're going to have to deal with. You're seeing a lot of people now hedging themselves against this inflation potential with assets such as Bitcoin, gold, and a lot of people are starting to actually openly hedge their portfolios with 5 or even 10% of Bitcoin just as a hedge against this inflation. And they have the opportunity and the money to do this, but they also have the experience and understanding of what is to come. You can't get a hit like the pandemic caused the world with. We saw like major issues with China shutting down. We've seen mineral prices dropping. Australian exports have been plummeting because of trade issues with China and supply issues. And we're seeing major shifts in the way that people work from home or away from home. Transport, we're seeing oil price issues now. These are major commodities. These are really important fundamentals, which are the lifeblood of the current system, or even I'll say the older system, because I don't think it's current anymore with what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Along with the litany of issues in the global economy, inflation, of course, is one of them.
That's one of the things we've been seeing, especially with fuel and house prices pushing quite high. And the Reserve Bank has been talking a bit about what they might be doing. I was reading an article where they wanted to, actually just a couple of days ago, they're going to start looking at how they want to rearrange their regulations and tighten the belt essentially with lending and the way that we're going to approach this potential inflation. The jumps in fuel prices have been amazing. I was rural recently, quite away from local cities, and the price was stunning to see those kind of numbers on fuel pumps. And this is the start of this issue, this greater issue of inflation. If you're looking 12 months ago, we're $1.20 a litre in Australia, roughly in New South Wales, hitting about $1.60 to $1.80 in some places. Yeah. We talk about the basket costs of what daily expenses are, fuel being one of them. Once that starts going up, it's going to hit the bottom dollar, the pocket for just common people. That's right. And of course, the common people are the first to experience this inflation because
the money gets printed at the bank level, the Reserve Bank level. And just to clarify for our listeners, this is the Australian Reserve Bank, not the US.
Yeah, not US.
Yeah. So first, the Reserve Bank's printing it, then the banks get it, and then they can offload it, essentially what is now cheaper money, which is, worth less. And they can offload it to the common people via loans and other things. And of course, the common people are the ones hit. What's interesting about these figures as well is that they take into account the petrol price, being $150, $160 a litre. But of course, it jumped higher after those inflation figures came in. So that's a sign that, the next month's inflation figures, again, will be higher. The Reserve Bank, of course, has to do something about that then. And the question is, what are they going to do? Because they start to raise interest rates. And of course, Australia's economy has been flourishing on the back of housing for so long. They start to raise interest rates, and interest rates on mortgages go up. And of course, that spells trouble for the entire economy and the middle class, which is something they want to avoid theoretically.
Yeah, especially if people start defaulting on those loans, that becomes a real serious issue.
Precisely. Yeah. Another thing back at home that I did see was this new ETF in Australia. This is more good news. An ETF in Australia has launched. It's called DIGA, Digger, and it allows investors to get exposure to the Bitcoin mining sector. I'm really excited about this myself because, while I'm obviously an investor in Bitcoin, I am also an investor in ETFs, and as a safer, I guess, a lower risk, less volatile asset. And you're fairly limited with ETFs here in Australia. You've got stocks, bonds, and international stocks and things like that. But gaining exposure to the Bitcoin mining sector is something I'm interested in for sure. It's a way of softening my exposure to crypto, but still being in crypto.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they went for exposure to the mining companies rather than specifically direct crypto or Bitcoin is we still face a lot of regulatory hurdles that they have to get over. And there's still possibly not enough adoption to just go straight into that. We do have some of the beta shares offer exposure to global companies which are working in those kind of asset spaces. So I am hoping to see more of these ETFs coming out, very similar to Digger. As we saw, in the US, the futures ETFs have done exceedingly well. So I think this is a really good step. And it's well worth looking into this one if you were looking to invest in that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, that about wraps it up for the news for this week. Thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. Remember, you can check us out on podcasts and all platforms, and also video on YouTube if you prefer that method. It's David Vader signing off. Any last words, Swarty?
I've really enjoyed this week. I'm looking forward to what we have next week. There's going to be some big news, I think. So, yeah.
Stay tuned. All right. Peace.